Professional athletes, they're worldwide brands, multi-millionaires, and household names. But can you name me one professional female athlete that isn't a sex symbol? Well, I've got a 14-year-old daughter playing sports, and I can't explain it. So I brought in Val Ackerman, the first WNBA president and one of the most influential women in women's sports, and the legend herself, Hope Solo, to help me figure it out. I'm Brant Pinvidic. This is the Why I'm Not podcast, and this is Why I'm Not Raising a Female Athlete. Hey, welcome to the Why I'm Not podcast. I'm Brant Pinvidic. This is the show where I dive deep into the trends and fads and things that generally people get all hyped up about, and I try to figure it out for myself. I have learned, of course, that just because I don't understand something doesn't mean it isn't good. A lot of times it means I might be the dumbass and someone else is the righteous one. So today we're going to get all deep into female professional athletics and what it's like being a female athlete in the male-dominated world. So here's my theory, right? Let me right to the heart of it. My son, who's an athlete, he plays volleyball incredibly well. My daughter plays volleyball incredibly well. We've talked quite a few times about how seriously does Kalis want to pursue volleyball and what are the options, and there's a professional beach volleyball and you could go play professionally all over the world. But for my daughter, it's a different conversation because there's really no future for her in any sort of professional side of that, and let alone that it's just volleyball. Any other sport, really, unless you're a tennis player, there's no real professional league that has where you make a real living at it, not like the men do. It's not even close. And so my theory goes like this. My son's ability to make a living as a professional athlete is limited only by his ability. My daughter's options to make a living as a professional athlete are limited completely by her opportunity.
Wow.
She does not have those opportunities because that's just not our culture. Our culture does not have a support, a lust for, pun intended, female athletes in a playing sense. We have a lust for them in a sexual sense. And like I said in the opening, can you name me a female professional athlete that isn't a sex symbol?
No, definitely not.
And that's weird, right?
It's super weird. I think that there's a natural fascination with both male and female athletes when it comes to sexuality because these are the finest specimen of our form. You know what I mean? Like these are people who train physically every single day as their career. So I think that there is a natural curiosity as to what that gladiator form is like from a fitness perspective.
Yeah, but I think it's beyond that. If you look at it like this, if you ask people in the street and regular people, and myself included a little bit, if you looked at the WNBA, which is the largest sort of professional women's organization, I would say, I could be wrong. I'm sure I'm going to get letters that there's some other ones, but that's sort of a big one. Like, do those women make a living at that? Do they have to have other jobs? Is that a part-time thing? Is it a full-time thing? Are they career athletes? Do they work in other jobs too? Like, do you know that? Is that like...
I would hope so.
I know you'd hope so, but what's the general feeling like? I think in general, people are like, that's like a cool sport that she plays at a high level, right? Like, I think our culture has a little bit of that degrading feel for that job, as bad as that sounds.
It does. It sounds horrible. I feel like our culture in general values different things when it comes to our entertainers. And I think a lot of people watch sports primarily for entertainment. And so athletes are thought of as entertainers for better or for worse.
Right.
And just like any entertainer in any field, you can go a bunch of different ways to set yourself apart and make yourself known. And I think a lot of people, especially if you are an athlete and you're working out nonstop, it probably is fairly easy to go right into the sex sells trajectory.
You add on to that, I don't think there's the respect for the athletic sort of drive and aggressiveness and tenacity and like win at all costs that a professional athletes need. If you put those attributes on a woman, it's like, ooh, I don't like her. And Hope Solo, who will be here in a bit, is like, that's kind of the branding she's got because she's super aggressive and wants to win at all costs. And people are like, what a bitch.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use the term aggressive because I feel like when applied to a man, aggressive is a positive attribute. But when applied to a woman, like you said, people will say, what a bitch. Or,
Right.
people really don't like that strong personality type
Right.
in a woman. And I shouldn't say people. I should say, in general, our society frowns upon that. I like to hope, the optimistic part of me likes to hope that that's changing. But it has not changed fast enough
No.
for where we currently are.
But think about how unfair this is, okay? For a boy or a girl in high school to be able to get to a point where you play Division I college at the highest level at any sport. Take soccer, take baseball or softball. The amount of work, the amount of time, the amount of practice, the amount of injury, the amount of sacrifice that you have to do, boy or girl, at that point is close to equal. For sure.
Sure.
And yet, after you've gone through all of that, if you play at a college level, at the highest level, you are the best college player in the entire country, top 10, let's say. If you are a boy, you have a likelihood of a professional career that could be multi-millions of dollars, right? And many options. Whereas a girl in that same situation, unless it's tennis, it's like you really don't have many opportunities. You've gone through all the suffering and sacrifice and all of the things and put your body through, yet the upside potential to you is literally almost not there.
That's heartbreaking.
It is, right?
Yeah.
I know. Really excited to have Hope Solo here. So, one of the prominent female athletes of all time, super controversial, has been through ups and downs in her career on the field and off the field. And she will give us a really interesting perspective what it's like to be a female athlete at that highest level, wanting to be nothing more than the best and winning, and what sort of came her way. But it's definitely not all rosy when you're in the mix of it.
Oh, I'm sure it's not.
And so I know Hope's here, so I'm going to get her in here. But here's the fascinating element of this, right? So I've known Hope Solo for about the last year. We did a project together.
Okay.
And I was like everybody else. I had my perceptions of what she was like. I figured she's going to be edgy. She's going to be tough. She's going to be all of these things because that's the persona. So I spent a week with her going around town and spending a lot of time with her. And it was just like, she was nothing like that. She was so like warm and I was just inspired being around her. And I was like, wow. And the more research I did into her sort of history, because even when I was looking at doing a TV show with her, there was a little bit of hesitation in our business and the agencies and at the network of like, well, the history there. So if you don't know the history, I'll give you the quick lesson before I get her on here. But so she was fired from the national team for calling I think it was Sweden after they lost in the Olympics, which was really bad. They lost. She called them, she said they played like a bunch of cowards.
Okay.
And then she got fired from the team for that.
Wow.
Because it was like bad sportsmanship to call somebody a coward.
Okay, but don't you normally get like a penalty for poor sportsmanship?
Yeah, no. I'm sorry.
Not like fired.
This was after the game. This wasn't even during the game. This was after. Right. So that look on your face is, I think, what everybody at the time was going like, that's not really a thing.
I could see like public perception thinking, oh man, she's kind of a jerk.
Yes. And by the way,
that would be the negative backlash.
Right. But she'd already sort of got that branding as kind of a jerk anyways. And this sort of like was like an added piece to her. And so they fired her from the team because they didn't like that. And it wasn't like some big outrage of how could you do that. And part of me was like, it's because she's a woman. If this was a guy playing a sport and he said bad things, which they do all the time.
How many male athletes are constantly under fire for significantly worse?
I know. Terrible, right? And the other big piece of her puzzle was she's been a wild vocal advocate for equal pay.
Okay, great.
At the highest level, meaning like she wanted to strike. She was rallying the soccer league, the female in the soccer league, to basically strike to get equal pay from the men. They bring in more money than the men every single year by a mile. And it's just like, and because she was so outspoken, they kind of targeted her.
I'm sure.
And she didn't have, I remember like basically, she was very emotional at the time if I get her talking about it, is, like the rest of the team wasn't really supportive of that. They don't have the same mentality of like, at all costs, we are going to go down with the ship unless you pay us fair. It was a lot more ambivalence to that side of it. And it was just like,
or just kind of like be grateful for what we have and
exactly.
sit down kind of mentality. Unfortunately, that is so prevalent in much more than just female athletics.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they're in a somewhat suppressed or victimized state, get in this cycle where they just think, well, I guess I'm just grateful for what I have.
Oh my God.
I can't speak up or else I'll even lose that.
Yes.
And it's
you're
awful.
Literally echoing all of those things. Yeah, that's just amazing, right?
Ugh, it's awful.
So I figured she'd be able to really explain what it's like being a professional female athlete.
Yeah.
Not as a part-time job, not for fun, not because she just happens to be good, but because this is the only thing she wants to do in life.
It's her career.
At the highest level and just what it's like. So let us bring in Hope Solo. Okay, Hope Solo, thank you for being here. This is very exciting for me.
Thank you for having me.
I know, and I couldn't think of anybody that could talk to the idea of what's going on in women's sports better than you. You have been through the ups and the downs in every facet imaginable and sort of right through the coals in the media and at the highest highs and the lowest lows. It's been a real crazy journey. And I thought you could give me some really good perspective on this.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Exactly. So let's play the get to know you game just a little bit for my audience so they understand. Like, was soccer your first sport, your first love, always going to be a soccer player, always going to be an athlete growing up?
So we had a project when I was 12 years old, and our teacher asked us to write a paper about what you want to be when you grow up. I remember, I still had it, it's all faded now, but it was in like this awful cursive, and it was double-spaced, and it said, when I grow up, I want to be a professional soccer player. At that point in time, in, let's say, 93, I guess, in 1993, there was no women's professional soccer. So I like to say that I dreamt well beyond what was possible at that point in time.
Got it. So as your career evolved, what do you think the moment was, or the combination of things that led you to be such a sort of like a big figure in the sport, a popular, because you like rose to prominence pretty quickly. It's not really a goalie's thing to do. It's not, it's not like the star out there in the field kicking the cool bending goals and stuff, and it's women's soccer, so it's less sort of big opportunity. Why do you think you sort of became one of these big personalities?
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you a little bit. I didn't rise to prominence quickly. I know it looked that way from kind of the outside looking in, but you got to keep in mind, I got cut from the 2000 Olympics.
Right.
I got cut from the 2003 World Cup, and I was an alternate in 2004 Olympics in Greece. I almost hung up my cleats in, when the league folded, the Professional Women's League in America folded in 2003. My dream was to become this professional soccer player, and I leave college. I'm this first-round draft pick. I think I'm a baller. I moved to Philadelphia and in my 1997 Blazer, packed full. I think I'm going to live the high life, right? I'm a professional athlete. And then after the first season, the league folded. And I think to myself, how am I going to make a living? I mean, I thought I was a baller making, as a first-round draft pick, making $35,000.
Right. That's like a living back then.
Yeah.
Out of college, you're like, this is it. I'm made.
So, my dreams got crushed. The league folded. And I had to make a decision at that point in time. What am I going to do? Am I going to go get an office job and use my college degree and make a living? Or am I going to continue to just bang on the door and put myself through hell to hopefully make a living playing soccer, but also playing for the national team, playing for my country?
Right.
And at that point in time, I was always the young kid who had so much potential, but I wasn't quite there. And I didn't know how many more years I could deal with not making money in hopes to fulfill my dreams. But I took a chance. I decided to take a contract overseas in Sweden. And at that point in time, I realized I'm not here to make a living. I'm here to play for the love of the game. And that's when really I just was able to let my passion come out. And nothing mattered at that point. I wasn't trying to make the Olympics. I wasn't trying to make the World Cup. And then that's when I was playing my best football.
Well, and it's wild because getting to know you over the last year or so, I've been like, wow, like you are such a core athlete. Like everything about you screams professional athlete. Your commitment, your passion for it, your flair. And I was just like, I don't know that comes across the same way because in female sports, it doesn't have the same resonance with people for some reason. I don't know how to explain it exactly why that is, but the female sports side of it is a harder thing to get that across, that it is just for the love of the game, that this is my living. Even when I hear you say that you wanted to be a professional soccer player for a living, I'm like, really? That's a strange goal for a 20-something-year-old girl coming out of college. Like, I would not have pictured that, particularly back then, as something that young girls sort of get in their mode, because I was like, I didn't even know there was professional women's soccer back then.
I was this young kid who was so great at sports, and I'd be running around the field and scoring 4 to 5 goals a game. I was better than any other young girl, and I remember just being proud to be great. And I learned from strong women in my family, as well as my father, who was my first coach, to take pride in being great at something. Times are different now.
Yeah.
People want to fit in. They want to kind of blend in. And we don't teach young girls anymore that it's okay to be great at something. We want everyone to just get a trophy or have friends when they play soccer. But I wanted to win at any cost. I was intense. I was driven. And that started at a very young age.
And now I'm going to guess that wasn't always as acceptable as it would be for a brother or somebody else on the boys' team. That would be more acceptable. Did you get flack from an early age like that?
I didn't know how unpopular it was when I was young. Obviously, now I know it's not very palatable to be aggressive on the field or to be intense for a woman to be aggressive and intense. Yet men are looked at as heroes. I mean, you see all these highlight reels of these male athletes like screaming at their teammates at the top of their lungs and fist pumping and just aggressive.
Right.
And then I'm told I'm too aggressive. How can you be too aggressive as a professional athlete? This is my passion. This is what I do for a living. And I'm intense about it because I like to win. Yeah.
I mean, I have so many questions about the sort of the past and the history and how you got here. I think what was really interesting is you became sort of this big figure, very popular, a sex symbol early, and people just sort of gravitated towards you. But that aggression that people saw, it was like this weird backlash for almost no reason. And it wasn't like you weren't good. Like you backed it up like anybody else in any of those other sports, yet it just like it didn't fit because it was this sort of female thing. And I think it sort of really sort of hit that head when you started in on the sort of the pay scale in women's sports. And like when we were talking before, when you were like, I was like, why would we all get paid the same? Like, I'm the one putting asses in the seats, and there's 2 of us that are making all of this work, and you guys are, rookies coming in. Why would we all get paid the same? Yet there was, you were saying that like the team itself was like, yeah, that's probably okay with us.
It's almost been just fed into us that we're a team and we all should be treated the same. And yet the player on the bench is not the same as Carli Lloyd, 3-time World Player of the Year. So why should, a younger player who hasn't really doesn't have the merit that Carli Lloyd does, doesn't have the experience, doesn't have as many goals, why should she get paid the same as Carli Lloyd?
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me, and it would never happen in men's professional sport.
No, and what I find so outrageous about that is that it would never be proposed in a male sport for sure. But beyond that, beyond proposing it as the organization or the sort of the team itself or the owners propose, this is what we want to do, forget that side of it. That's outrageous on its own. But what's more telling and about the psychology of where we are today is that your teammates were like, yeah, that's fine. They voted that would be okay. Yeah.
It still hurts me to think about that phone call that day, that conference call. I think it's a sense of safety when everybody gets paid the same. It's a part of the culture, and some female athletes don't want other female athletes to be considered better than them or more worthy of them. And it's a horrible culture to be in. And I lived in it for 20 plus years trying to fight these fights and these battles. And we want equality. We say we want equality. Well, then we have to do it amongst ourselves within the locker room.
Right.
It's a merit-based system. And that's what is equal between women's professional sports and men's professional sports, is if we go off of a merit-based system.
Right. But it doesn't feel like that's the way it sort of has been played out in our society today. And even when I look at that team, I'm like, do you mean like everybody on that team, they're professional athletes? Or like, I still sort of, and I think a lot of people figure that like that's, they have a day job and then.
Well, I can assure you that there are some quote unquote professional athletes in the women's league in the NWSL who are really, according to FIFA's definition of a professional athlete, are not really professional athletes.
Right.
But U.S. Soccer doesn't seem to care that FIFA came out with this definition.
Right.
And yet they're not even following FIFA's governing body. Our governing body is FIFA, and we're not following the rules. The definition of a professional athlete is if you get paid more money for playing sport, for playing soccer, than what you incur to live off of.
Right, got it.
So you have to make more money than your expenses, basically.
Got it. That makes you
And
rational.
there are some women in the NWSL who are making I think they just upped the minimum, but it was $8,000. And now I think it's $15,000. And in some cities, you can't live off of that.
Right. That makes it pretty tough.
It does.
Now, here's sort of the question that I wonder as I look at it. So you got tremendous blowback from the organization and from FIFA and sort of the whole soccer world, the idea that you were rallying for this sort of equal pay and more money and all that kind of stuff. And they sort of blanketed this on you. Do you think that it really is it just about money? Was it only about the dollars and cents? Were they trying to save a few $1,000s on each player? Or was it the fact that they would push it so much was like there seemed to be a deeper thing there?
I think it's both. They definitely want a sense of control. I want to throw out a couple numbers for you just because I think it's important for your audience to understand. The women in 2016 brought in $20 million for the Federation.
Got it.
The men had a negative loss of $5 million for the Federation.
Right.
In 2015, to date, we still have the biggest viewership for any football game in America. The women, not the men.
Yeah.
Projected ticket sales for next year, the women are supposed to bring in $5 million on ticket sales alone, and the men are projected to lose $1 million on ticket sales.
It's amazing.
So if you want to go on, of course, you can go on the Equal Pay Act, which was passed 60 years ago by JFK in 1962 or 3.
Right.
60 years ago, but nobody is enforcing it. The Equal Pay Act says that your employee cannot discriminate based off of gender.
Right.
Which obviously U.S. Soccer is doing. But then you go by the numbers, and we're actually bringing in more money for the Federation. What's the reasoning on that?
I mean, listen, it would be,
That's some deep-seated
there's something wrong there.
Male chauvinism.
Yeah, there's something wrong there. Because it's not like the NBA. The NBA brings in bazillions of dollars. The WNBA does not. You could easily see them making the argument saying, hey, these are not comparable leagues. They're not comparable draws. They're not comparable TV revenue or anything. The WNBA,
different employers as well.
And even if they were the same employer, you couldn't make the same analogy because you'd be able to show the disparity between the size of the organization. And when you look at men and women's soccer, particularly in the United States, you're like, wait a second, your points are wildly valued. It's like, okay, do you want to pay us based on revenue and our portion and our ability to bring revenue? Or do you want to pay us according to what the men make? We'll take either one at this point, and you're giving us neither.
Or American law.
Right. And what I found really surprising is, and I think this is why you sort of find it almost like hurtful, is that you had the leverage. You had the ability to say, like any professional athlete, hey, I am part of the reason why people are coming to watch this. I am part of the reason why these television revenues are there. I want to be compensated. Here's the contract I want. And your agent goes in and bats it around, and there you go. And it's show me the money moments, right? And you would have been able to do that if you had the support of the rest of your team and the rest of the female athletes in that organization around the country. And for some reason, that didn't happen. And that's partially on the organization, their reasons, what they do, but it's partially on there's something about the culture around female athletics that didn't allow that group to be like, yes, we're going to kick ass too. They were more like, nah, let's all.
Doesn't just happen in female athletics. This happens in any boardroom. It happens when a woman goes into a boardroom to negotiate a contract. It is oftentimes fear-based to stand up to your employer. We have been by Sunil Gulati, the president of U.S. Soccer, and Dan Flynn. We have been threatened by both of them, by the board at U.S. Soccer, saying, look, if you want more money, then we're not going to schedule as many games throughout the year, which means we don't have as much potential for bonuses.
Right.
They say, if you're going to go on strike, well, then we're going to pull your health insurance. And many of my teammates had kids. So now it affects their families. And there was a moment where we told each other, no matter what, we have to fight this fight because this is going to change all of the dynamics in women's sports across the world on a global stage. So no matter how much fear they instill in us, we have to do this. And we looked at one another in the eyes and we said, all right, we'll do whatever it takes. But in the end, I get fired. The attorney that I brought in, who was a hard ass, he wasn't going to roll over to U.S. Soccer.
Right.
He was going to stand against them. He was the one who got the congressmen and women behind us. We had the support of ex-president Barack Obama. We had Hillary Clinton's support. We had a massive amount of support. But in the end, other players didn't want to get fired. They saw what the Federation did to me.
Right.
That's scary.
That is scary.
They go into it very naively.
Right.
But keep in mind, I had been around the team for 4 different CBA negotiations. So I've seen the same thing happen over and over and over again. And I knew it takes more than that. We can't trust the Federation. Even if they start playing nice and say, let's meet about the next CBA and let's make it better for everybody. That's not going to happen. They're playing the game at the very beginning, so we don't go on strike.
Right.
But many of my former teammates decided to trust the Federation. I knew better than that, of course.
Right.
But in the end, they signed a new CBA, and guess what? It's still not equal.
That's amazing.
But U.S. Soccer put out, with all the power that they have within the media, all of their contacts, they acted like it was this huge progressive contract. And even if it is better, it's still not equal. So it still doesn't abide by American law.
Yeah, it's still a problem.
I mean, I just did this interview the other day with a woman who works for Sports Illustrated. And she's like, well, aren't you so happy the new CBA addresses so many disparities and problems? And I said, it doesn't matter if it's better, because if it's a little bit better, you're holding us back because it's going to take another 4 years to maybe get it right.
Right.
So really, we have to put our foot down from day one and say no more. We have to have an equal contract.
It's a really interesting cultural dynamic when you look at the sporting world, and this is what I was saying in my intro about my daughter, where it's like I'm not raising a female athlete because there's nowhere for them to go really in any real sense at this point. Like if you look at it, what's strange is where it's just like there's no real opportunity. And it's amazing when I go and I see so many little girls playing so many sports, and I'm looking at them and I'm like, wow, you do not have the same future or the same opportunities that all the little boys have. Now, the likelihood of them becoming professional athletes is almost as unlikely, but it's like our culture does not view it the same. And so I don't know, like, why is female tennis a multi-million-dollar sport? How does that work?
I don't have the answer to that, but what I can tell you is since we filed the lawsuit against U.S. Soccer Federation with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, government agency that is supposed to make sure that our employer follows the Equal Pay Act. Mm-hmm. So, when it comes to any type of lawsuit and legalities, it could take years. But we're in the process of doing this. Once we stood up to our federation, granted, we have the lawsuit, but we still signed a CBA that wasn't equal. But once we stood up, there was a trickle-down effect amongst the world teams. So I don't know if you've heard, but 8 of the best players from Brazil quit. They quit because of having to endure years and years and years of sexism and a lack of support.
Right.
Brazil could be one of the best teams in the world, and they should win a World Cup. Instead, the players were like, I'm sick of this. I can no longer deal with this. There's not enough money involved. We don't have enough support. And there's so much sexism. Yeah. Brazil, Republic of Ireland, Denmark, Sweden, many of these countries went on strike. Others stood up to their federations in very, very strong ways. And I am happy to announce, if you haven't heard, that Norway is the first country to pay their women footballers equal to their men. Wow. That could have happened here in America.
Yeah, we could have been first.
U.S. Soccer could have been the heroes.
Yeah. But no.
But it is happening. I mean, I think this is a really important time for women in sports.
Yeah, and I think that, the argument about the numbers that you bring in is really the best argument of all. And I've never heard a really good argument against it, really. It's just been something that's been okay and it's been accepted because that's the way people look at female athletes. They don't look at them with the same level of seriousness. And that's a shame. And I think we would be nowhere near as far in this process if it wasn't for you.
Well, I do appreciate that.
Here's the thing. All the shit that you've been through actually helps the organization and our culture a lot because it exposes a lot of the issues. And so you've kind of had to be the scapegoat for that because the hypocrisy that you've gone through really shines a light. And so I look even with this latest thing where you called the Sweden team cowards or whatever, which is such an innocuous comment that no man would ever have been disciplined in the slightest bit for saying that. Not even in the slightest. That would have never made anything. But the fact that it was you and your reputation a little bit and just that it was like perfect timing to like get on you. It was like, yeah, it was awful.
They did not want me a part of the new CBA.
Which is so weird.
They didn't.
And to get away with it is just so strange.
To fire me using the word coward. I mean, that was pretty weak.
You guys just lost and it sucked. So you're like, this
Jim
sucks.
Howard pulled a fan out of the crowd in one of his MLS games, and there's no.
Yes.
I mean, he got called back into the national team.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, if you look at all the, it's the ridiculous double standard. It really is, and you've kind of like put a big glaring light on it because nobody else has had that issue. You know what I mean? Like no one has had any. There's never been a big female presence athlete that's sort of pushed these boundaries that's made people go like, oh, that is a little sort of weird that people are upset by that. Like at the worst you could say it was like maybe not the most sportsmanlike comment at the time, but like, oh, we got to get rid of her off our team is insane. This kind of thing helps shine a light on the difficulties that female athletes in all forms of sports are having and the potential that's there. And it calls to the double standard and it does call to the hypocrisy that's out there. And so it's like you kind of had to martyr yourself through that because, you like I said, you've taken the raw end of a lot of these things that would never have been dealt to a male athlete in the same position.
The culture of the U.S. team, too, is to be the girl next door or the ponytail posse, I think. And, I was a very, strong voice for injustices early on in my career. I was very intense. I kind of was just, I don't know, I had a different mentality and it wasn't always popular, but it's still amongst the team's culture to just be innocent and that girl next door. And I assure you, my teammates are not innocent.
Right, of course. But, and sort of my last sort of point on where I was speaking about earlier is that in the female athletic world, again, big success comes, yes, on the field, certainly, but a lot of it comes off the field, and it's still there's still a sexual element to it, which is surprising. And again, not in the male side of it whatsoever. If a male athlete is known as a sex symbol, that's like an extra super bonus for him. But really, it's all about what he does in the field. Whereas in your world and in female athletics in general, it's like it's kind of there's a sexuality to it that is like a prerequisite to being even remotely popular in the pop culture because there's not enough of what you do in the field that people are going to get excited about. They need to be like, wow, she's so beautiful, or wow, she's so sexy, or in that world. And it's a very strange world to get into. How have you reconciled with that? Because you are a very prominent sex symbol from the very beginning of your sort of pop culture run.
I had to deal with many ethical decisions. Keep in mind, I made most of my money off the field, not on the field.
Right.
Whereas that obviously is opposite to men's sports, where they make most of their money through their playing contracts.
Right.
So I had, and if I wanted to make a great living, then I needed to do photo shoots. I needed to do extra appearances. I had to be on TV and do things I wasn't comfortable with. I did balance it with I always wanted to be known as an athlete first.
Right.
So, and that went against the advice of my former agent. They didn't care. They just wanted the money.
Right.
They pushed me out there trying to convince me to do Playboy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't want to be known for that. I want to be known for being the best goalkeeper in the world.
Right.
But they kept pushing the money at me, and they kept saying, what agent does that? Are you really looking out for my best interest?
Right.
It was all about the money even to my agent at that time, which I was with Wasserman at the time. But, as I got older, I realized that the importance of all of those decisions.
Right.
And I placed people around me who want to bring out the best in me and who I am and what I stand for and what I believe in. And so I'm not getting pressured to do these stupid reality shows anymore or, pose for Playboy and Maxim. I did, of course, do a few shoots that were sexy, but I didn't get naked.
But
the ESPN shoot.
I was going to say the
but
body
that wasn't
issue,
sexy.
right?
That was more, I wanted to respect myself as an
Right.
athlete, and I was very proud of my athletic body and figure.
Did you get any blowback from that, or was that well received?
No, I didn't get any
It was pretty good,
blowback.
right?
Yeah.
They have a good reputation. I think that helps a lot.
I do still get mad when there's a picture of me holding the hose. It was supposed to be like a domestic style picture that they do with every athlete in the magazine. Right. And I told the photographer, I held the hose for like 1 second. And I told the photographer, I don't feel comfortable doing this shot. We go back into like this RV, looking at the photos. I'm so happy with many of the shots. And I said, I do not want that one to get released. Next thing you know,
That's right,
I'm
in the
still
magazine.
signing that photo. And it's like me being all sexual with a hose and water. It was awful.
That's just exactly how it happens,
Of
right?
course.
Oh my God. And you must have dealt with an unbelievable amount of sort of sexism and in all the process, because there's so many men controlling that world, right? And so as a beautiful female, it's not easy to navigate that, I suspect.
Well, it's become just normalized. Sexual harassment has become normalized in
Right.
Hollywood, let alone in sport. But nobody ever talks about it. And so I was inspired by the strong and influential women of Hollywood who said, they started coming out and talking about it. And it made me reflect. And I thought about all of the uncomfortable situations many
Right.
of my teammates and myself have been in. And you think back and it's rampant. It's not just the powerful white men,
Right.
but it is all across the board with general managers, with press officers, with coaches dating their players and
Right.
going on to marrying them out of college.
Everywhere.
It is with trainers and doctors. It's amongst teammates in the locker room. It's rampant, and I wish more female athletes would come out and speak about it.
Yeah, because it's kind of important to deal with not the individual incidents as much, but the culture itself is like, wow. And I think that's what everybody's feeling now as the Hollywood sort of accusation run starts going through. You're like, ooh, well, this really was everywhere. And it's like, yeah, it's everywhere.
You know what makes me mad too? It happens every 4 years at the Olympics. They come out with this list. The sexiest Olympians of 2012. The sexiest Olympics of 2016. And I would have people text me like, oh, you made the top 10. Congratulations. Yeah, congratulations. We're not even in the Olympic Games yet. We haven't medaled.
Right.
And people are congratulating me for making that dang list.
Right.
I was so offended. And then people would text me being like, oh, sorry, you should have been higher up. Like, this isn't my
This is not my list.
Long goal to be on. Then they started, I always planned on speaking out against that dang list that they put out every Olympics. And to me, that goes against the Olympic spirit. The Olympic spirit is about winning and competing and leaving everything out on the field. It's not about sexism in sport.
Yeah.
And so the American media is a part of that. I'm sure, media across the globe takes part in that. But then they started having lists about male athletes as well. So I can't really say it's sexist. But
it's still, there's a layer of sexuality that really sort of
that's how they're
is
selling
injected
sport.
into the sport at a highest level. And it really feels like only the female sort of sports have that at the core of it. Every female sport that's had any real sort of prominent success, I mean, maybe other than gymnastics and the Olympics, but that's once every 4 years. You never hear of gymnastics pretty well anywhere else until 4 years comes along. Then people are swimming and jumping and everybody pays attention. But in general, it's like tennis had the Anna Kournikova years where it was all about the shortest, cutest skirts you could possibly get and the sexiest, and whether she played tennis well or not didn't seem to matter all that much. She turned into a global superstar for her sexism than more than her sort of athletic tennis ability. And it sort of combined those two things together. And it's like, oh, that's what we want as a culture. We want a really good athlete that's really, really sexy. If you're female. If you're male, you just go be really good on the field.
Absolutely. You look at our captain and 3-time World Player of the Year, Carli Lloyd, best footballer presently in the world. And people don't even know her name. You know who they know? Alex Morgan.
Right.
Alex Morgan hasn't scored as many goals as Carli, hasn't had as many impactful goals, hasn't ever really shown up for the way Carli has in major tournaments.
I know exactly what you're saying, yeah.
And you wonder, Carli has done everything for the game. She's passionate. She's a competitive athlete. She's a leader. Yet people don't give her that respect. And why? Because she doesn't wear makeup on the field, because she doesn't get false eyelashes, because she doesn't have a boob job, because she doesn't do photo shoots naked. I mean, honestly, that's what she has to balance with competing for endorsements with her teammates.
Which is kind of crazy. In our world, if she went and got the eyelashes and the boobs and did the makeup and whatever,
we all do it, though.
More money.
I'm telling you.
That's
I've
crazy,
seen players put bronzer on their legs, so their it shows their muscles more. I mean, men do it as well. So
they do?
You don't think Cristiano Ronaldo wears some bronzer on his legs?
I never thought of that.
I only know that because the equipment men get so mad and have makeup all over their shorts.
Oh my God.
I'm giving you guys all of the
secret
secrets.
In soccer. Oh my God. Cristiano Ronaldo has bronzer. Oh my God. This is fantastic. This is going to be a new thing that's coming out now. You can't believe
news.
it. Yeah. And now you're going to see him on the field in the next games. His legs are going to be all stark white. He's like, I don't wear bronzer. This is ridiculous. That's going to be the new scandal. Forget the performance enhancing drugs.
I called somebody else out.
Right. All right. So let's say my daughter comes to me. She's playing soccer or she's playing softball or basketball maybe. And she says, Daddy, I think I want to be a professional athlete. I should be shaking my head like you, saying no.
Let me just tell you that should my husband and I start a family and have kids, I will be pushing them in the direction of science.
Right.
What else? Engineering.
Basically
anything but sports.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's just too much, right?
I think so. And who knows where the team sport is headed. I mean, maybe play an individual sport. Stick into tennis if your daughter wants to play. Throw into tennis. But the team sport, it's changing. And it's really hard to see what social media has done to the team aspect.
Right.
It's become a me type of sport. I was always deemed the asshole and the selfish one in the game because I just wanted to win. And I would do anything to win at any cost. To me, that makes a great teammate. But most of the time what I've seen is many of my teammates care more about having more followers on social media right after practice or after a loss, in fact. They want to fly down to Rio and party, even though we just got sent home early from the Olympics. Right. I've seen it just ruin the team aspect. Yeah. And I think it's only getting worse.
That is a really good point that I don't hear very much at all. Is that it's changed the team dynamic, the social media, and the success of big individual performances, not even on the field as much as after the game or in other areas can sort of launch you on social media or into sort of superstardom that can change your sort of worth in the marketplace, causes people to do a lot of different things that they wouldn't be doing 20 years ago on a team.
Well, I've seen that my teammates meet and think more about what they're going to do should they score a goal rather than mentally prepare for the game.
The goal, yeah. We're actually rehearsing what they're going to do to score the goal.
Exactly.
They're prepared for what happens after they score their goal.
And we tend not to score when that happens.
Right.
But yeah. It really hurt me for a long time the last couple of years being in team sports.
Yeah, and like I said, you've definitely sort of martyred yourself through this world, and I think that it's great for what you've gone through. It's great that it shone a light on a lot of areas that may have gone unnoticed, which I think is great. I will say, if you look at any of the criticisms that anybody's brought against you, if you listed them on a piece of paper, one by one, all of them, and you put them against any male athlete in the business anywhere, it would not register on the scale at all. And I think that's basically all you need to know about how female athletes are treated in our society.
The cool thing is that I have had numerous parents, especially fathers, come up to me and they say, look, I'm raising a young girl, and when they grow up, I want them to have the courage to be different, to be themselves, and to speak out against injustices or what they believe in. And I want my young daughter to be like you. Well, those are the moments that bring a tear to my eye, and I realize I'm doing something right.
Well, I posted this after we went around on our little tour, and I said, like, after spending time with you and getting to know you, I was like, forget the athletic part of it. Like, my daughter doesn't play soccer. I don't care anything about that. But what I saw from you and what I felt from you and what you represent is exactly what I teach to my daughter. You are exactly what I hope my daughter grows into as a person, as a woman. That strength and that drive and that resilience is so admirable. It's like, that's all I can hope for her, growing up. So I think you've done great.
That means so much to me, but I got to tell you, it's not the easy path.
I know.
So I wish your daughter all of the best.
No, Hope, I want to say thank you for joining me today. This was one of my favorite
interviews.
interviews.
Thank you, Brant, for having me.
Wow. It really took me back when she was saying that everyone in the women's league is paid the same, like they're all under the same contract, because that's so not what we're used to hearing about any of the male athletes. They're constantly vying for the better contract and renegotiating, and when someone's contract is up, that's a big deal, and that's something that we all follow. So to me, having everyone on the same blanket contract on one hand feels like it would support the team element that she says is missing, but on the other hand, it makes me feel a little bit like it's babysitting, like these women in some way can't handle the competition, but they're in sports. Of course they can handle the competition.
And listen, I could have gone on forever with her, but I wish I would have gone in a little bit more detail about that exact thing, because I don't know that people really understood that, is that they were negotiating a contract as team members on a team, and the proposal was everybody gets paid the same. Just think about the absolute insanity of that. And who would you have the balls to suggest that to? What kind of people would be working for you where you would suggest a group of them all get paid the same in a performance level where they're all doing different things? They're scoring different goals. They represent different things. Some of them, everybody knows their name. Other ones people will never have heard of. And the theory is to propose the idea that we all pay you the same is revolting and completely inappropriate.
The only defense I can find for it is that, well, then there won't be fighting amongst team members. Everyone
no one would
will feel like an equal.
ever say that to a men's team ever.
No,
but
definitely
even
not.
worse, to take it to another level that makes it even worse, is that the women voted yes. Like, if the organization said, this is our final answer, and if you don't like it, stuff it, you guys can figure it out, but this is the way we do things, it's like paying actors scale. Hey, it's scale, and unless you're gonna not work, then you're out. And I could get that idea as the owners trying to put that over. But to have your teammates basically be like, whatever, we'll just all take the same, was just like, that doesn't help the vibe out there that women are as competitive and as athletically driven as a profession as men. That sort of like takes everybody back a huge amount of steps.
Well, and a favored nations agreement like that works if everyone's being paid phenomenally. I can see everyone voting for it if they're like, you know what, we're all going to get paid this amazing salary.
Yeah, actors do it.
We're so happy to be here. Yeah. That I can understand. But to say we're all going to take the same amount, and it's, I mean, based on what Hope was saying, it's really what most of America would consider very, very low middle class.
Yes. I don't want to be down on it. I just, the lack of equality just sort of irks me. When you have a daughter, it does, these kind of things really poke you. You know what I mean? And when you have a son and a daughter, and there's things that are different and I get lots of it. And Hope gave me that perspective where it's like, hey, if your team wasn't willing to fight for it, then you kind of got what you were willing to accept. And it's just like, it's too bad that that's what they were willing to accept. That bugged the living crap out of me.
Yeah, that stinks.
All right.
This is the last thing that I want to say about it, and this may come off as incredibly naive, but hey, this is why I'm not, right?
Yes, that's exactly where we're at right now. Go.
When are we going to get to the point, or will it ever get to the point where men and women can play together in the same league? Like,
Never.
Is that a thing that can happen? I would love to see that happen.
Never.
Maybe I just read too many fantasy novels
where
the female knight comes in and kicks all the guys' asses.
No.
But like, that's the world that I want to live in.
No.
Why can't that happen, Brant?
That can't happen.
Well, in esports, we have men and women competing.
And that's going to be
against each other.
fantastic. But when you get into and that is, by the way, that's groundbreaking if you think about it, because every other physical, impactful sport, even minor physical like pool or darts, is still segregated. And there's just something about the culture that can't quite get up to that level yet. Now, those sports that don't involve physical contact could end up amalgamating over the next sort of few decades, because as women are growing up wanting to do more sports, driven to more sports, being interested in more sports, they will then be able to, cultivate those skills over time and rise to that level. But when you get into contact sports and whatnot, you're never going to be able to overcome the sort of the physical limitations, because there's stuff that just goes a little bit deeper than just sort of how high or what your height is and what your weight is. There's lung capacity and hip shapes, and there's center of gravities and balances that at a professional level are so precise.
Yeah.
It's like why swimmers, like, they shave their bodies, because you're talking about tenths of 1/100th of a second.
Yeah.
So if you've got physical sort of differences in men and women at a biological level, there's certain things you could never sort of overcome in that sense. But esports is interesting that it does sort of transcend that. I never thought about that. That's a good one.
Yeah, no, kudos to all of the pioneers who are out there making waves, because it's not easy to be them. The stuff that Hope describes going through with the negotiations and all of that is just, it sounds absolutely miserable. But for the next generation, she has paved the way and opened those doors.
Yeah. So this is one of those why I'm not moments where it's like I've actually almost done a 180, which is strange, because I try to get my head around all of these things before I get too deep into it. And I've been spinning around here a little bit. But here's why I'm not raising a professional female athlete.
Okay.
Is because I'm not raising any professional athlete. And neither are 99.9% of the Americans out there. And basically everybody listening right now, you're not raising a professional athlete. So get that out of your brain, right? So I get that out of my brain. I just look at, from an athletic perspective, I spent so much time thinking about the lack of opportunities or what I perceived as an inequity. And I wasn't paying attention to enough to how many opportunities there are now and how many people like Hope have come before and opened those doors where my daughter sees this. She sees professional athletes as females for the first time, whereas when I grew up, that wasn't something. And her kids will see it differently, and their kids will see it differently. And athletics are far more than just being a professional. It's a lot about the team and the constructive elements that happen. And I think that I don't have to deal with the idea of my daughter trying to kill herself to be a pro athlete. And I should be super, super thankful about that, because that's a tough road. If you end up with a kid who's driven beyond all driven to be there, that's really tough. Whereas my daughter just does it for fun. And you know what? She's got more opportunities than any woman coming before her, and every day it gets better.
And
so I'm kind of happy about that.
If at some point she comes to you and says, you know what, I've decided I'm all in on this. This is what I want to do for a living. I don't want to do anything else. This is where my heart is. Then you just have to support that.
Yeah.
And hope for the best.
I'm pretty sure that's not going to be in sports, though. That I can say for sure. So that's good. I'm happy with that. I'll take that. Trisha, this was fun.
Yeah,
this was a
really
good one.
Fun.
The Hope one was fascinating to me.
So fascinating. Like I said, I am not in that world at all. So this was really cool.
So she's at the edge, and I love that. You can check me out on @Brant Pinvidic at any of the social media platforms. This is Why I'm Not podcast. This has been Why I'm Not Raising a Female Athlete.